David, today's show promises to be an important and exciting one. We are going to be talking about this concept of fictional characters being inserted into real-world narratives, and actually, even more importantly, real people being fictionalized in films. How are you today, David?
I'm very well, Jason. It's an exciting show is ahead.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's interesting about this is we're calling it, well, it would help me if I had we've just been hit by a litany of bizarre technical problems that converged on me at one time and were quite difficult to contend with. You know, David, I don't know if I told you this, but people can now watch our daily, or not daily, people can watch the live streams on crowdsourcethetruth.com, David. And I did that because, David, hit me with a monologue for a second. It's been a rough morning.
All right, yeah. So this is the context. I've just received from Vimeo a threat that my live streaming account will be terminated because a moderator, an unidentified, this is the thing that really appalls me, it's always some identified entity, has decided that I'm trivializing tragedies by calling them hoaxes.
But wait. We don't want to go too deep into that. I'm sorry to stop you. I know I asked for a monologue. So I did mention this briefly to our viewers the other day, and I am still working with Vimeo to try and straighten this out. But yes, there is a bit of a concern with one of our videos having been removed, and I think that a lot of viewers might have already observe that. So I just want to make sure that people know they can watch our YouTube live streams on crowdsourcethetruth.com. And of course, Crowdsource the Truth 2 is still active. This show is going out on there right now. And David, we also remain dedicated to continuing our sponsor exclusive shows that people can see on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards, subscribestar.com/reverse-CSI, and Patreon and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But what's happening right now, David, is really a coincidental litany of circumstances that could be happenstance, but we're going to talk today about a bunch of people who are perhaps connected loosely, but there are a series of coincidences surrounding these individuals, and we're just going to pose the question to the audience of, are these in fact coincidences, or is something going on?
Well, what I feel that they, whoever they are concerned about is what you and I and you and your fellow guests are doing, in my opinion, are doing an analysis of real characters in real narratives. And that scares the hell out of them. Because since World War II, they've become very practiced at injecting fake characters in real narratives, or real characters in fake narratives, or even fake characters in fake narratives. And they've become very skilled at that. And they've spun the public now, the television or the viewing public, in fact, to total confusion, because majority of people are not equipped with the tools necessary to ground truth, whether they're being hit with fake characters in real narratives, real characters in fake narratives, or fake characters in fake narratives. And of course, the classic example of that are the wonderful double-cross deceptions of World War II run through Oxford University and what appears to be a global network of Rhodes scholarships. So I don't say the technique started there, but I would say that in World War II, the double-cross technique was perfected at Oxford University. And many of the Rhodes scholars who went to Oxford University, particularly from the United States and Canada, went back to their mother countries, right, if you will, and carried on the techniques of fake characters in real narratives, real characters in fake narratives, and fake, etc., right through to some of the major events of this last century and the present century, including, I would suggest, the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah.
So, as you know, that or we've collectively identified some key Rhodes scholars who appear to have gone through, dare I say it, a double-cross training program. One of
And
them,
let's
of
take a
course, being
step
Bill
back for
Clinton.
just a moment. Sorry, David, to interrupt, but I think it's worthwhile to reiterate for people what we're talking about with this double cross, the Oxford double cross. I think we want to spend really some attention on this group of people we're going to be talking about today, because you've told us in the past about Elmer Davis, who was the director of the War Information Office during World War II. And he's going to be one of the subjects we'll focus on today. But let's start, if we could, David, with this double-cross system, how it was developed, how it concerns Oxford, what it's all about.
Well, let's give an example, which is Operation Mincemeat, right? And that leads actually to a Rhodes Scholar who came back to Canada, I believe fully informed on Operation Mincemeat, and helped to inject it in British Columbia for some of the big attacks in the latter part of the century. So Elmer Davis said that the way to inject propaganda into the public mind is to do it through entertainment media in such a way that the public does not even recognize it's being propagandized. And of course, he would have been working with Sir John Masterman, the Don at Oxford University, who was the chairman of what was called the 20 Committee. And of course, 20 in Roman numerals is XX, hence the term double cross.
Now, let
So
me
there
ask,
we have
how do we know?
Go ahead.
How do we know that he was working with the with Masterman?
Well, because they were both using double cross techniques, right? And the same technology, which was actually back then it was called the Combined Communications Electronics Board, installed by Radio Corporation of America, apparently, and used by the BBC to broadcast black propaganda into Germany and develop and inject and deliver these double cross operations, such as Operation Mincemeat. So
But do
we
we
can
know
say
for
they were
sure
connected.
that they worked together?
Well, they had to be working because the only way the Allies, or at least America and the United Kingdom, could work together is to use the Combined Communications Electronics Board. That is to say, you can't inject double cross propaganda unless you're using the same technology to do the injection. So, Radio Corporation of America built the transmitters called Aspidistra that were used by the BBC to broadcast in German news, basically black propaganda. As soon as the Germans switched their radio broadcasts off to prevent the transmitters being used as homing beacons, the British Broadcasting Corporation, using RCA technology, and I believe the Combined Communications Electronics Board, would actually start transmitting in fluent German the second the Germans switched it off. And then they would combine that with pamphlets and rumors spread by agents within Germany to support the theory, as far as the Germans were concerned, that the German high command was getting its elite commanders out of Berlin, right, and leaving the peasants to fry. And a very similar technique was operated through Operation Mincemeat. And I don't know, do you want me to quickly go through the theory of Operation Mincemeat, which was a very
Well,
classical double cross operation?
you've kind of intrigued me with this notion, like this is a detail that I was not aware of, that they've specifically worked together. So I've been searching here for Elmer Davis and J.C. Masterman. And again, I'm racing a bit. I want to make sure people know. J.C. Masterman is the former British, is he MI6, MI5, the guy who wrote this book.
Yeah, that's right. And he was the chairman of the double cross, the XX committee in the United Kingdom that worked with the Allies and in particular the Americans on some of the big operations, including Operation Mincemeat, which tricked the Germans into moving 3 divisions from Sicily to Greece as a result of that man being planted off the coast of Portugal or Spain with a notification or a letter from, I think, Lord Mountbatten to the Mediterranean commander that the attack would not be through Sicily, it would be in Greece. But of course, it did come through Sicily. But the Germans kept 3 divisions or 30,000 men in Greece because they believed the Sicily was a feint. right?
Right.
And what I'm saying is that technique, which is probably the best known because there was a film made about it. And incidentally, it would be interesting to analyze the film, which
Huh.
is The Man Who Never Was, from the point of view, were they real characters in a fake narrative, or a fake narrative, fake characters in a real narrative, or a fake fake? Because one of the people who did the planning, now what's the name? Ewan Montague, played himself. Ewan Montague was a solicitor
Ah.
or a barrister in London who helped plan Operation Mincemeat, right? And he
Wow.
played
Wait a
himself in
minute.
the
This is a
film.
revelation, David, because you and I have been speaking about this concept for a while. Here he is, Ewan Montague. So this guy was involved in the actual spy program, and then he was in the movie about it. So this is, wow, I wish I would have known about this. I would have included this guy in the image for today. And we'll be going into some detail with people as to why we've selected these individuals. There's a robot standing on this spaceship, David, that looks like it could win an Emmy Award if it were nominated, although it doesn't look that much like it would win an Emmy Award, to tell you the truth, because it's just, well, I thought I would have the image here for you to look at, but I'll get it there. Our audience is seeing it right now. This is a scene I've constructed, David, that's intended to resemble the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. So now you're talking to us about the film that was made about Operation Mincemeat. How many people would have known about Operation Mincemeat when it was happening versus the number of people who got their information about it from the film?
Well, millions of people would have got their information from the film, and it was a wonderful film, and it was a brilliant act of deception. The people who actually created the deception, they would have been kept in sort of pigeonholes, so they couldn't share information with each other. I mean, and risk the whole project. But one of the people, or the main people in, coordinating it, was Sir John Masterman, whose great uncle was a City of London MP with a Rothschild. But anyway, I digress. And this guy, Ewan Montague, he was a barrister, I think, in the City of London, probably a member of the London Solicitors Company, but I digress. The point is, they use this real fake narrative or crossover very subtly. So what the public does not get is the real character in the real narrative, and that's what they're getting from you and myself and your fellow guests, and that's what's scaring the hell out of these people. And I think that's the result in the action they're taking. Over to you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, David, and it's actually a really unusual phenomenon that we've all been kind of desensitized to. But again, this image that I've put together for today, it features from left to right Wolf Blitzer, Tony Stark, Elon Musk, the Emmy Award-winning Gork robot standing on the spaceship from The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Elmer Davis, right below you there in the right-hand corner, David. And the reason I've selected each of these individuals is because Elmer Davis, a lot of people don't really know, was a news reporter in the 1950s, and he was a very recognizable character. I've recently learned that he played himself in the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he was the head of the War Information Office. You've just dropped this bombshell on me that you suspect that he worked with J.C. Masterman, and I'm trying to find some corroborating information that can help us make sure that that's the case. I found this book when I was searching for both of them. I'm not familiar with this. It's from Max Hastings. It's called The Secret War, Spies, Codes, and Guerrillas. And apparently this book talks about Elmer Davis and J.C. Masterman. Where do you think we could find some evidence of them actually working together?
Well, again, under the protocols of the 20 committee, I believe they would have kept people in boxes such that if any one of them was exposed, they didn't put the whole project at risk. So that's the basic principles of a double cross operation. So you only know so much. And I'm quite sure Elmer Davis, who was a Rhodes Scholar, he knew a certain amount and he played a role. However, he did say the way to propagandize the public is to inject the propaganda through the entertainment media such that the public doesn't even realize it's being propaganda. So he was actually executing the protocols of the double cross operation without necessarily directly having a telephone conversation or some kind of communication that might have been hacked into, because we are surrounded by hackers, some ethical, some not so ethical, some efficient or effective, and some ineffective, some incompetent, right? So the British and the people at Oxford understood if you were going to put these double cross operations together, you had to keep people isolated as much as possible with a limited span of control over the people beneath them, such that if any one was arrested, right, they couldn't reveal the whole project. And
Right.
each one of these people, in my opinion, is expendable, including Elmer Davis. If necessary, they would have had him killed, right?
Wow.
Because, it stands to reason. If you are trying to get 30,000 Germans to move from Sicily into Greece and wait for an invasion that never came, a lot of people are going to die if you fail to move 30,000. Even more in the Pas-de-Calais, where the double cross operations called Operation Bodyguard tied down 25 divisions, German divisions, for an invasion that happened in Normandy. That's 250,000 men. So if these double cross operations are blown, a lot of people are going to die, right? And they relied on this secrecy, I believe, and these techniques in the attack of 911. But perhaps I digress. Coming back to Elmer Davis, the only way of these people to communicate successfully in some degree of safety is to find an electronics or an encrypted method of communicating that was bare bones, right? And that technology was called, back in World War II and today, very important, Combined Communications Electronics Board. And the Combined Communications Electronics Board, the only company that could have built it as an integrated system on a global scale is Radio Corporation of America in the United States, headed by David Sarnoff. Right? So now in the United Kingdom, you had RCAGB 1929, which is now called Serco. So I think we can directly or indirectly prove that RCAGB 1929 implemented the Combined Communications Electronics Board used by Elmer Davis and John Masterman in Operation Mincemeat. But you won't have a record of them talking together directly.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. You're talking about compartmentalization, and I've seen a lot of evidence of that happening even in some of the attacks that you and I are subjected to. Now, that is a good explanation as to why we may not be able to just Google up something that's going to present us with, J.C. Masterman standing there smiling with Elmer Davis. But Elmer Davis did say that it's best to propagandize people through entertainment, and that way they don't know that they're being... I mean, you make a movie about World War II and Operation Mincemeat, that's going to appeal to a certain type of viewer. But if you make a movie about science fiction or whatever general topic, it could appeal to many more viewers. And this movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, did you see that film, David?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I haven't really seen it either. But it's interesting to note that Elmer Davis appears in it as a newsman. He appears as himself. The premise is that aliens have come to Earth and, there's news reporting on it. And rather than just having some actor play a news reporter, they actually used Elmer Davis, playing Elmer Davis. And I presume they would claim to have done it because it adds realism to the film, or he's a recognizable news guy, and it causes people to feel like it's more realistic. What do you think about this concept, David, of using news people as actors in fictional films?
Well, I think it's absolutely fundamental to the double cross concept. So, for example, you can take a real character, let's say hypothetically, General Alexander Haig on 911, right? And you can give him a fake narrative, right? Such as when he said on Fox News, I think, he said when he was asked who does he think is behind this, he says, well, I don't want to speculate. I don't have the information, but we know where to look, right? It's either the Palestinians or Bin Laden group. That is a fake narrative. So You've got a real character, General Alexander Haig, former Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, with all of the knowledge necessary to put on a double-cross operation on the scale of 911. Because as Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, he would have done his homework or his history, and he would have understood the techniques used in Operation Mincemeat and Operation Bodyguard. It's basically how to avoid massive casualties by getting inside the enemy's command system, like these characters have inside the United States command system on 911, and make the enemy believe that you are where you're not, or you're not where you are.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting, really confounding of reality that could, in a general sense, kind of confuse people. And it's one of these things that's kind of subtle, maybe not so obvious. Perhaps it was strange to see in 1950 the first time a news guy appears in a movie, but it's almost commonplace now. I mean, the first one that came to mind when I was thinking about it, there was a Mission Impossible movie not that long ago, Mission Impossible Fallout. And there's a scene where Tom Cruise and the whole Impossible Mission Force is kind of an imaginary CIA type organization that doesn't exist. So it's self-fictional, yet in the films it interacts with the CIA. So it causes the viewer to think that it's real. And in this scene, they've captured some guy, they're interrogating him, and there's a TV on in the room, and CNN comes on, and we see the internationally recognizable character on CNN, who is Wolf Blitzer. And I don't remember the details of the scene, but he's reporting on something that's pertinent to the prisoner. And based on what Wolf Blitzer says on the news in the movie, this guy in jail with Tom Cruise is caused to believe that all hope is lost, and so he might as well confess. They get the confession from him, and then Wolf Blitzer pops out from behind the set and admits that he was working with the Impossible Mission Force to try to capture this guy. And it's yet another double cross within the movie being depicted. They've fooled this guy, but they're also fooling the audience because Wolf Blitzer is so recognizable as a news guy.
Okay, so let's just take this notion. And now you challenged me about 3 days ago to find some catchy phrase, right? And you can shoot it, right? To explain what is otherwise almost inexplicable. I mean, many people, I think realistically, can't get their head around the protocols of a successful double-cross operation, right? It's just, it's a bit like, was it J. Edgar Hoover said, we come face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous we can't believe it exists. So I spent a lot of time trying to think of a catchy phrase, and I've developed this notion of a murder and cross-actor reality show. Right, Maxar, right? Now, you can always put a cross as an X, and that's where you get the 20 committee is a double cross operation, because 20 in Roman numerals are 2 crosses, right? So Maxar is, for me, not a bad term, and we can go on that later. So let's take, was there a double cross operation on 911? We know that General Alexander Haig, playing himself, is being interviewed on Fox News. And he comes up with this very profound statement before any forensic analysis of the crime scene could have taken place, where he's asked who's behind it. And he says, well, I don't want to speculate, but we know where to look. It's either the Palestinians or the Bin Laden group. Now, what else was going on in New York at the same time that General Alexander Haig made those statements? There were the Node brothers, right, who are 2 fake characters, in my opinion, recording the attack on the north face of the North Tower and the south face of the South Tower. And I would say there are 2 fake characters in a real narrative. They're actually recording something that took place. Now, I believe you went to the Tisch School, didn't you?
I did, but just one quick thing, David, before we move off of Alexander Haig. It's always been remarkable to me that if you type in Alexander Haig, Fox News, September 11th, 2001, any of this stuff, you would think it would bring up an image of him on Fox News, but it is nowhere to be found. So it's another component of what we're talking about here today, of this, real characters in made-up narratives and made-up characters in real narratives. It also seems to employ a component of kind of spoliating the evidence of that stuff and replacing it with the fake narrative. Any part of it that leads to the real narrative, they want to cover up with as much fake stuff as they can.
And I've just made an amazing discovery. Maybe I haven't looked for it properly, but you remember we had that wonderful lady, Maria, on our show,
Yes.
and she took us through as a witness to the raid on Starnet, right? And she had looked, and I had looked, and you had looked at the Vimeo recording of the Starnet raid.
Yes.
Did you watched it?
I did.
Right? It's been taken down.
Whoa, when?
I don't know. I believe it was after we interviewed Maria. And it tells
Wow.
me that the people behind Vimeo are terrified of what you and I are doing. And I believe that threat to have my live stream Vimeo account terminated, I think it came after, and maybe you can do the research, it came after our interview of Maria about the raid on Starnet, where allegedly there were between 100 and 150 law enforcement officers that seemed to be coming from a mixture of the IRS, the United States Customs Service, the FBI, the CIA, the Vancouver Police, the RCMP, and the high-tech squad from Ottawa, in probably the biggest raid driven from one country on another that has gone almost totally unannounced in the media. But it was a very important raid because they took away all of the evidence of a hardcore adult and child pornography and sportsbook betting in 60 countries, right? Which is organized crime at its peak. So now you have the No Day brothers, and people don't seem to understand. They've been working with the Duane Street Ladder Company, and I just throw that out there. An anagram of Duanest, Duane Street, is the No Days, right? So there, I think you have two fake characters. They were trained at the Tisch School, right?
The
Where
No
I
Days
believe
were.
yeah,
Huh.
you went, and they
But I never
recorded a
knew them.
film that purports. Well, this is very interesting. Let me just do a little riff there, right? I believe the students, alumni, and faculty at many of these schools of photojournalism or whatever have become witting or unwitting accessories to these kind of double cross operations, where the school is actually used or targeted to further the deception, right? And I'm talking about UBC and Oxford University and the Tisch School. But there you have it, these two guys. Now, you've looked at the clip of the No Day brothers where the camera does that odd kind of traversal and then elevates and zooms in. And if there were crosshairs on that particular camera, I mean, you know more about that than I do, but certainly it stops for 1.25 seconds on the north face of the South Tower, the north face of the North Tower, before something hits exactly where the crosshairs would be. And I believe they call that in the snuff industry the money shot. Yeah, there it is.
We better not show too much of this because people love
Okay.
to strike our videos here on
Yeah.
YouTube.
So
But before we
let's
go
switch that.
too far down the road on the No Day brothers, because they are potentially inserted here, I still want to flesh this out a little bit more for people as far as, you know, what might be going on with these fake characters being inserted into real films, because people are noticing in the comments that this is a strange phenomenon. And I mean, you know, for instance, when you Google Barry Seal, who was the pilot who flew all that cocaine back from Nicaragua to Mena, Arkansas, certainly when you look at images, well, it's actually not having the same result that it has previously. But yeah, I mean, here, right, very early on, we're getting Tom Cruise images mixed in. I didn't Google Tom Cruise, I Googled Barry Seal. And look, we've already got multiple images of Tom Cruise showing up, such that eventually Tom Cruise's performance as Barry Seal may be more memorable than the man Barry Seal himself. We got a lot of pictures of Tom Cruise here.
Well, if I could point out that I believe you have someone outside the book depository announcing the events associated with the assassination of JFK, who's a media figure, right?
Yes.
And is the anyway. You take that story as far as you wish, but there you have for me a real character in a fake narrative or a fake character in a real narrative. It depends on your point of view. But reporting on the JFK assassination, and you've told me he starts by extemporizing, and then the second sequence that we see, he seems to be reading a narrative. Is that correct?
Right. Well, my impression is this. People can go to YouTube and look up this Roger Sharp archive. This is a collection of newsreels from a news reporter by the name of Roger Sharp, who happens to be the father of the president and CEO of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the very same group, David, that is suing me. And yeah, let's talk about this a little bit. They don't want me to talk about it, but while we are still here on YouTube and people can still log on to our shows on Patreon and Subscribestar, I think it's important that people know about this. You know, I had the opportunity, David, to appear on InfoWars earlier this week, and was very generous of Alex Jones and David Knight to give me that opportunity because they, like me, are extremely concerned with the suppression of free speech. And you would think that the guy who is the president and CEO of the group that gives out Emmy Awards for news, documentaries, those types of things, that he would be particularly concerned with freedom of speech and might handle a copyright issue with some degree of sensitivity and even the knowledge that there are fair uses of copyright material. This archive of all of these news clips was put together by Adam Sharp, the CEO of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. And he says right here, he is sensitive to issues pertaining to U.S. copyright law. He's asking the copyright holders of this material that if they object to his use, they should contact him. He doesn't instruct them to strike their YouTube videos and attempt to destroy any effort that he might be making. He wants them to contact him, but we're getting a bit far afield here. I don't know if Roger Sharp was reading from a script, but people who go to the Roger Sharp archive can look through some of those videos. It appears to me that his initial reporting right after the assassination is frantic, very curt, very fact-based. He's reading from notes, and then when people see the preview video associated with this particular YouTube channel, they're going to notice that it is a very composed and much different presentation where it does seem to be prepared, perhaps scripted, and it introduces this question of, what is news reporting and what is acting?
Well, and what, of course, in order to pull this off, this double-cross deception, you need to have a single timeline, and you want your fake characters to switch to real and your real narratives to switch to fake seamlessly, such that the public doesn't see that the switch is being made. And in order to do that on a global scale, you have to have a very precise clock, right? So it comes back to the Combined Communications Electronics Board used in World War II by the Americans and the British, and in the present time. It's still the same terminology, as you know, and I know we don't want to go off on that target, but the idea of switching between fake characters and real characters and fake narratives and real characters, it requires a certain very sophisticated technology that you and I have explored at depth, and I think this is troubling them enormously because so far, I think you and I have not been deflected into chasing fake characters or fake narratives. We've realized where the anomalies are, and they know that we've realized where the anomalies are. Hence the tremendous effort to shut you down, that copyright, the Emmy attack, and in my case, it appears the Vimeo live streaming. Now, what I think strategically, and I think you and I are very capable of thinking strategically, I think when people who are hiding a lie do this to people like us, they reveal more than they intend to.
Right? I agree.
And I think it's a bit like a sniper who reveals his presence to another sniper by mistake, right, is normally dead, right? And snipers use a variety of techniques, including one, they have to stay absolutely stationary or as stationary as possible and be well camouflaged. Or sometimes they'll use a decoy, like throwing something out to the right and watching for a movement, it might be a mile away, to see if the opposing sniper follows the decoy, because if they show themselves, you can kill the sniper. So it's a bit like this kind of operation that we're being subjected to. It requires absolute synchronicity between the real and the fake character switch and the real and the fake narrative switch. And to do that, you need a world-class clock that provides you with the same second or the same millisecond anywhere in the world. And we know that Serco has custody of that clock, right? So now with the case of, any of these double-cross operations, it leaves a signature when the media aspect or recognition comes very aggressively against people like yourself and myself who are doing real character and real feature and real analysis. And let me just give you one of the Diller killers, right, as a very important name, is a Garth Ansier. Now, can we just
Well,
move
wait a
on to
minute.
that?
You're getting ahead of us for a second, because I do want to
Okay.
talk about these guys. But when you brought up the issue with Vimeo, this is going to bring us to what you're talking about. And I want to reassure sponsors that although there may be some disruption with some of the videos, I am working with Vimeo. We will have a solution. I want to encourage people to stay with us on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and David, of course, on Patreon and subscribestar/reverse CSI storyboards, subscribestar.com/reverse CSI. The reason why I bring this up, David, is because Vimeo is part of a conglomerate called the Interactive Corporation, and they go by IAC, which is interesting because you and I have spoken a lot about CAI, and both IAC and CAI are possibly anagrams for CIA. Just a coincidence? I don't make any claims about that other than they're using the same letters. And so when you talk about killer dillers, that's kind of a famous old British term, right? But it's also the name for this crew of individuals who were essentially the, what would they be? The disciples of Barry Diller?
Proteges, I think that's the thing. Like he mentored them. And so this Garth Ansier, I believe, is very interesting because on 911, he was the executive vice president of America Online.
Oh,
and if he,
whoa.
if
That's huge. Hang on, now wait a minute. So the Barry Diller, he's the chairman and senior executive of IAC, okay? And then Alexander Haig was on the board of CAI, and now you're telling us that this crew of proteges, the killer dillers,
Well, one of them, Garth Ansier, is the executive vice president of
America Online.
Yes, AOL now.
But he's also the president of BBC America.
Yes, later. But in 2001, and I think this is absolutely critical, Garth Ansier, who was groomed or mentored by Barry Diller, became the executive vice president of America Online, where the founder corporate director, now listen, folks, this is very important, the founder corporate director of America Online is the late General Alexander Haig.
Wow.
Now think about that.
Yes.
That means the guy who I believe was the real character at the fake narrative of 911, who says we know where to look. 2 minutes before the second plane hits the south face of the South Tower, says we know where to look. It's either the Bin Laden or Palestinian groups. That's the founder director of America Online. His executive vice president is a Diller killer, right? And he's producing basically a real character in a fake narrative that should be very compelling for the public at large, because they now know where to look. It's the Bin Laden group that is theoretically run by a guy straddling a yak in a cave in Afghanistan, whose propaganda office is in London, right? And I believe Osama bin Laden is the equivalent of Major Martin in Operation Mincemeat. Over to you.
Well, but not only that, David. I mean, so you've just blown my mind with this because we've spoken quite a lot about how Alexander Haig was on the board of AOL and how Alexander Haig is involved in the CAI private equity, which I guess was funding AOL. What did CAI private equity have to
Well,
do with AOL?
CAI Private Equity Group was funding McDonald Detweiler, now Maxar's development of the instrument approach procedure anti-hijacking software that was used on 911. So the CAI Private Equity Group included three Nortel directors who I believe treasonously handed off all of the Nortel intellectual property to Huawei prior to 911, meaning that Huawei would have had a man in the middle position on the 911 attack. Over to you.
It's super interesting in other ways as well because people are already clued into the fact that AOL may have been the first attempt at a Facebook type thing where everybody is connected on the computer. CAI, private equity, then we've got IAC, Interactive Corporation, and there now seem to be a bunch of individuals who are involved in both. And Vimeo is one of the holdings of this IAC group. The other thing we should say about Barry Diller is that he is a member of the Television Hall of Fame, which is an Academy of Television Arts and Sciences thing. So I start to become very curious when the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences is suing me, and the thing that they're suing me for doesn't seem to be the true purpose. They're claiming that I've violated their copyright and diluted their trademark, but it is quite clearly a parody that I did of their image, and they're forcing me to go into court to discuss it. You know, David, people can watch our live streams now on crowdsourcethetruth.com, and right below the live stream, I've added another sponsorship opportunity where people who agree with me and think that lawfare is what's going on, not actual lawsuits, they can sponsor the show and help me put an end to this type of abusive, legal bullying. But these are rich guys. They can bring 50 lawsuits a day without really batting an eyelash. So what else do we want to know about this? What's his name? Ansier?
Garth Ansier. Well, let me just go back to the principal IAC shareholders, and you won't be surprised to find that the top three shareholders of IAC are the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, BlackRock, and TIAA.
Wow.
And BlackRock and TIAA are the shareholders, or would be shareholders, that Serco would have convened together to meet on the 47th floor of the North Tower on 911. And I think there was a real narrative there. That is to say, the Serco shareholders that met on the 47th floor were actually engaged in, dare I say it, murder and cross-actor reality play, a Maxar play, which actually guided the planes into the buildings. So this is a very fruitful analysis. And when I said earlier, it might have been a mistake for the Emmy people to come after you for copyright infringement, or Vimeo to come after me or my live streaming account on the basis of some spurious claim that I treat tragedies as hoaxes or maybe undermine the viability of the vaccines they intend to give us all, because it's a bit like a sniper. They're revealing a lot about themselves and what they're scared of. And I come back to this point that I believe your show, with your guests and myself, we are focused exclusively on real characters in real narratives. That is to say, we're taking their captive audience away from the myths and the fakes and the deceptions and so on, towards what I believe, and you've magnificently called it, crowdsource the truth, right? And I believe what we're doing, every show that we do, and you with your other guests, basically is a case study of deception, and very successful deception that has endured and perhaps originated or was perfected at Oxford University I believe has been propagated around the world through the Rhodes Scholarship Scheme. And there are people that have become or been Rhodes Scholars that played a key role in the deceptions. And let me just introduce the name James Sinclair, who is the father of Margaret Trudeau, the divorced wife of the late Pierre Trudeau. And this comes back to Operation Mincemeat, was with the Royal Canadian Air Force in the attack on Sicily. That is to say, he's a pilot, or at least an expert in aerial maneuvers, etc., that would have known about the use of Operation Mincemeat as a double cross operation to move German forces, 30,000 men, to Greece. Now, he died in 1984, but I believe he was behind the design of the autopilot artificial intelligence algorithms that were exhibited or talked about in that 1981 conference I went to, that were
Yeah.
ultimately used in the 9/11 attack. Over to you.
Well, that conference was called IJCAI, so we can't not talk about the fact that it also has an anagram for CIA in its name. And you know, David, I've just discovered one other thing in looking at the Wikipedia page for Garth Ancier. Look at that. He's been nominated for a Daytime Emmy Award for an outstanding talk show.
Point made. QED, Quod erat demonstrandum. The guy is embedded in the entertainment media industry, spoken of by the Rhodes Scholar Elmer Davis as the best way of injecting propaganda into the public mind without the public waking up. And I think, again, these people are very cross because you and I and your fellow guests, I think, have succeeded, let's claim, brilliantly in waking up the public. Now, the public is still being whipsawed by, various characters who I believe represent the fake characters in the real narrative who are paid or rewarded in some way to take us off track. And it hasn't succeeded, and it won't succeed. Over to you.
Yeah. And you know, I was looking at something just the other day. John Cullen sent me a video from Entertainment Weekly talking about the Emmys. And I think the Emmys are going on right now, I'm pretty sure. I mean, this is amazing, David. Let me just show you this real quick here. We don't want to show any of their content because they're sure to strike the video. But this is the Entertainment Weekly YouTube channel. They have 360,000 subscribers, more than 3 times the number of subscribers of the Jason Goodman YouTube channel where we're normally hosting our live streams. And in 3 days, talking about the Emmys, which these are their predictions about what is allegedly an extremely popular television show. Less than 2,500 people care about this at all, David. They're not watching. And I think it's quite clear, particularly to media experts, that an increasing number of people are moving online with their viewing habits. And I just want to show you. So this is a channel with 360,000 subscribers. Whoop. Have you got me, David? Hello? We've got 360,000 subscribers, and since September 14th, less than 2,500 views. When we look at the Jason Goodman channel,
I just lost you, Jason.
Okay, I've still got you there, David. Give me a second and we'll reconnect you. But the point I'm getting at is even the least popular videos on the Jason Goodman channel are getting many, many more views than their content is, and that's with 1/3 of the subscribers. So it causes me to wonder if they aren't worried that we're actually challenging their very industry by doing something extremely disruptive here. Now, David, can you not hear me?
No. It went out for a minute, I think, but I lost you for a minute.
But our viewers are saying they don't watch TV. Tom is asking if anyone has ever watched the Emmys. I've seen it, but I don't really watch it. The point I'm getting at is, David, I think what you and I are doing is striking at the core of what these guys do. They hand out awards to people who tell you things like Lee Harvey Oswald shot John F. Kennedy, a truck bomb blew up the Murrah building. I don't know if you realize this, David, but Wolf Blitzer won an Emmy Award for his reporting on the Alfred Murrah bombing there in Oklahoma City. So it seems when you give a news report that they like, you might get an Emmy Award, but when you challenge what they're saying, you might get your business destroyed.
Well, may I just take a second, well, a little more than a second, to read this business of how you inject content into
Sure.
social networks using that patent, right? A system and method for creating content such as artificial reality messages at an event, particularly among members on a social network, enhancing and expanding experience, shares an event with spectators such as friends or subset in participant social network. AR message may include artificial reality words, products, or symbols and appear in a perspective view of the event to participant or spectators. And this is very important. In addition to creating an active gallery for an event, messages, audio, and video, virtual goods, money, bets, applause, other feedback, and donations can be exchanged, i.e., Emmy Awards. So if you
Right.
want to inject a controlled story or fake narrative into the entertainment media or a social network, you have the means through this patent to exchange something as limited as applause, right? Like people voting for the Emmy, right?
Well,
And
it's certainly an award of value.
that develops a momentum. In some cases, it might mean a great deal of money because suddenly you become a star,
That's
right?
right.
And just if I can, as an example, the BBC, in conjunction with Microsoft, has an agreement with what's
Angelina
her name now,
Jolie.
the film star, Angela, to help children learn to recognize truth at media events. Well, I mean, does Angelina Jolie have more qualifications than you do for recognizing truth? I mean, she came to star in the Hackers, right? And there's no coincidences. Over
Well,
to you.
speaking of no coincidences and speaking of Microsoft, do you know where the Emmys are normally held, David?
Is it the Microsoft Theater or something? Yeah,
Indeed. I think
right.
they've moved it recently, but it's been there many, many times. It's quite interesting. David, we're almost out of time here for our YouTube segment, but viewers are going to be able to join us in just about, we've got to get over there. It's just 3 minutes from now, David, but on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, subscribestar.com/reverse CSI, and Patreon and subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. People are going to be able to join us for the second half of the program. We're going to go more in depth on all these guys and look at the connections. It's highly coincidental. But I'll see you over there in just a few minutes, David.
Thank you, Jason. Bye now.
Thanks for watching, everybody.